Hello again, everyone. I'm Lana. I work at West Orange Public Library doing collection development and occasional book discussions. I wanted to thank everyone who joining us tonight and everyone who will be watching this program later on. Thank you for supporting the library. We are very happy to bring you all these virtual programs while we remain closed. This month, the month of June, we're gonna have 3 more authors visiting us and talking about their books. To be able to see all the offerings we have for the kids and teens and adults, you can either check our Facebook page or our website. On our website, you can just see the slides or check our calendar. I would like to mention also that we keep purchasing electronic books and audio books through eLibrary and J. And you can always check out these books because we purchasing them for West Orange residents only. So you're practically not gonna have any wait on them. So we will be recording this program and it will be available on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page a little bit later on. And now it's my sincere pleasure to welcome our author today, Barbara Linn Probst.
Okay.
Barbara, it's all yours.
Okay, great, good. Well, yeah, I think it's so cool you're doing this, I have to say, because, you know, I can remember, I think of times when I've read a book and just loved it and wished I could meet the author and hear from her what the book meant to her, how she wrote it, why she wrote it. So I think this is really fantastic that you're now collecting these interviews for readers that will discover my book in the months and maybe years to come. And I think it's like super cool. So thank you. Okay, so yeah, so this is my book. I hope it's coming across frontwards and not backwards. Oh, good, good. Queen of the Owls. And we'll talk about it. There are no owls in the book. So I always like, when I meet with book clubs, I know people haven't read it yet when someone asks me how long I've been interested in owls. There's no owls. It's a metaphor for the protagonist, her sort of bookworm self. We'll talk about that some more later. But just by way of background to introduce you, I come to novel writing. It's about my 5th career. I was started out as a public school teacher. I was a social worker, clinician, therapist, advocate for kids who didn't fit in. I wrote, actually, my first book was nonfiction called When the Labels Don't Fit. It was a guide for parents of quirky, out-of-the-box kids, which I consider that I am, and I had, and so forth. And then I got a PhD, and I became a researcher, professor. What I would research would be talking to people about their experience living with mental illness or disorders or suffering of some kind. And I mention all this because all of these, I also ran a not-for-profit in New York City, was trying to help poor kids and improve the school system. I was a full-time mom for a while, did lots of stuff. But I mention this because all of this was, in a way, preparation for becoming a novelist, because I feel that what makes a novel live and breathe is you as the author's deep interest in people, in what makes people tick, how they deal with suffering, how they deal with the quest for intimacy, relationship, meaning, joy, identity, belonging, all of these human, universal desires. And so people have asked me, well, is this book coming from your own life? And the answer is both yes and no. You could say that I took things I experienced and processed them and extracted their emotional essence and re-embodied that in fictional characters, so that while the story is nothing, I never experienced the events in this book, the internal journey of the protagonist is something I understand very deeply. So sort of a long way of introducing the genesis of this book. And so what's it about? Why did I write it? That's kind of where we begin. Well, Queen of the Owls is contemporary women's fiction. It's what they call a book club novel because it asks the reader to think as well as feel. It has a great plot. It's a page turner, but it's more than just a plot. It also delves into issues that we can really sink our teeth into that have no quick and easy answers. So it's, in a nutshell, a woman's search for wholeness and authenticity behind all the roles that she plays, that we all play, whether it's wife, mother, colleague, friend, sister. All of these are important, but there's something else behind it that is the missing self, especially for those of us like my protagonist who have perhaps neglected a part of who they are. So she has always defined herself by her brain, the owl, and not nurtured, not embraced, not claimed the other side, the embodied, beautiful, sensual part of her nature. So she's searching for wholeness. And what's really kind of cool about the book, I think, is that the story is framed around the art and life of iconic American painter Georgia O'Keeffe. And I just so happened to be sitting in front of an O'Keeffe painting well, no, it's not a painting. It's a poster of her painting. If it was her real painting, it would be worth millions of dollars. But anyway, so O'Keeffe does not appear on the pages. It's not a historical novel. She doesn't walk across the stage, but she's present as the inspiration, the muse, the person that is inspiring my protagonist, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is writing her dissertation about O'Keeffe, very intellectual. And in the course of the novel, she comes to understand that you cannot know something just with your mind. You have to know it through all of yourself, your feelings, your heart, your body. So this journey towards wholeness is got a sort of parallel in her study of O'Keeffe. And we'll talk about O'Keeffe a lot tonight, but that's what's kind of cool about this book for me. And a lot of people ask me, well, were you always interested in O'Keeffe? Were you an art history major? And the answer is no. I mean, I knew a little bit about her and I liked her work, and I just had this flash of intuition. And the more that I learned about O'Keeffe, the more it informed the developing story, to the point that there's no way I could have written it without O'Keeffe once it got written. So I'll take you on a little bit of my journey to the research I did and how the book was shaped, and then we can talk about the story itself. So I'll ask Lana to show the first slide where you can see me and the book. This is my pre-pandemic hairdo in this slide. Here we go. See, look at that. I hope you can see it. And I have this gorgeous cover, which I'll tell you about that as well. But I thought what I would do first is just read you the first page of the book. I don't know whether you prefer to look at the slide or look at my face while I read it. It's up to you, Lena. Either one is fine. I will read you the first page, which kind of introduces the story. Everyone had to meet somewhere. If Elizabeth thought about it that way, the fact that she met Richard at a Tai Chi class was no more or less auspicious than a first meeting at, say, a bookstore or bus stop. It was only later, looking back, that everything seemed heavy with meaning. She had seen people practicing Tai Chi on Founder's Lawn in the center of campus. The unbelievably slow flexing of an arm or foot, the serene gaze that always made her feel, in contrast, nervous and clumsy. She had watched, entranced, as they rotated their hips and pushed effortlessly against the air. After a while, it felt odd to simply watch. Being inside the movements instead of looking at them, that was the point. The Tai Chi studio was only a few blocks from the university and offered a discount to faculty and students. Elizabeth was both, a PhD student who taught undergraduate courses, which she took as a double sign that she ought to enroll. Besides, Ben had his squash games 2 evenings a week. It was only fair for her to have Wednesdays. Ben could manage. He knew how to read Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel at least as well as she did. Better, according to Daniel. At 4.5, Daniel was quite sure of his judgments. Ben wouldn't begrudge her one night a week. And then when she came home, tranquil and balletic, he'd applaud her decision. Anyway, that was the theory. So that sets us up right away. We know Elizabeth is a doctoral student, a teacher. She's married. Her husband feels quite entitled to his 2 nights a week at squash, and she has to justify her right to have 1 night a week at Tai Chi. She has at least one 4-year-old son who's a little bit, we get a little flavor for his personality, and his personality plays a very big role in the plot later. And we see her yearning. She's looking at the people doing Tai Chi and wants what they have and feels it's not enough to just look at them as an outsider. She wants to be inside the movement, to know it for herself. So the entire book is already present on the first page. And I feel really proud of that because that first page just sort of came to me. I didn't do a lot of rewriting. So you already see something about the story, right? And the other thing I think I'll just share is this cover, which is like, it's a gorgeous cover. I'm gonna let Lana show us the picture of, I'm sorry, I'm not going in order. Number 3, the white iris painting for a moment. I forgot to ask her to show us. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna go back one. Go back one to the, no, back. Whoops. It's what I called photo number 3 of the, it's the flower that's.
I got it, just give me 1 second.
Oh, okay, that's okay, I'll keep talking. So the cover designer at my publishing house wanted to incorporate one of OKeeffe's paintings into the cover. So you'll see it in a moment. Going back, and it's not the next, it's the one at, there we go, there it is. This is called White Iris. So you can see that, and I'm going to show you the cover again now of the book. Okay, you can flip back to my face. Sorry, this is a challenge to poor Lana. Okay, I wanted to show them the book so you can see where she incorporated it. So it's, in a way, it's kind of great because Keeffe's work is the backdrop, right? It's not, you don't need a degree in art history to read the book. But so the sense of Elizabeth yearning for something that she feels OKeeffe had, because OKeeffe was a really interesting character. You could show us the portrait of her next if you like, Lana. That's slide 2. She was quite an amazing woman. This is one of the many photos her husband, Alfred Stieglitz, took of her. And he was fascinated by her hands, many pictures of her hands, because as a painter, she created art through her hands, and he was a photographer. So he didn't have as direct a relation as she did. And so one of the, little bit of a spoiler alert in the book, but that's okay. Elizabeth meets a photographer at Tai Chi who convinces her that the only way she can understand OKeeffe is by doing what OKeeffe did, which is posing. But it's not posing like in this picture. OKeeffe posed nude. Now, we're not going to see a slide of that because I don't want to get in trouble with the library system. That's why I chose this one. So we can exit this now. Thank you. And so what OKeeffe, we'll come back and then we'll pick up the other slides in a minute. Oh, I was going to tell you about the cover. I'm sorry, I'm very distracted. So when my designer first showed me the cover, I hated it. Can you believe it?
Go back to the slide.
We can come back to me, to my face. It's okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll get to that. We'll get to those in a minute. That's my story, and I'll take you on my journey learning about OKeeffe in a moment. Anyway, when she first designed this cover, I totally hated it. And so I use this as an example because as an author, you fight for the integrity of your book, but sometimes when it comes to the production of the object called a book, as opposed to the story, you could be wrong. And so I learned a lot from the designer. Anyway, in the story, Richard convinces Elizabeth to reenact some of the photos that OKeeffe posed in for her husband, which some of which were nude and got her a lot of notoriety. So we can talk about that a little bit later, but why don't we go through the slides to make it easy for Lana? We'll just go in order now, and I'll tell you about some of the stories behind the writing of this book. So we can go now to the next one in the order. You've seen this, and you've seen, now we'll go to the one that follows, which is me with one of OKeeffe's paintings called Black Iris. And this was probably the painting that got me interested in OKeeffe. I saw it in books, and I just thought there was something so profound. I just wanted to crawl inside it. And it has been interpreted very sexually. OKeeffe herself denied all such interpretations. She said, that's on you. You can put what you want in it, but I just wanted to paint the flower so close, so big, that you couldn't avoid seeing it. And so she's famous for painting these oversized flowers to try to make people stop and notice them in a way that they never would in real life, because in real life, the flower is quite small. So the story of this painting, it's not on view. And I was able to arrange a private showing, just me and this painting, for like 15 minutes. It was totally awesome. And I mean, a painting at a public museum, anyone can ask for a private viewing. You know, it wasn't like it's sneaky, but you have to take the trouble to ask. So this was like an amazing experience. And I'll show you the next one in the next slide, part of my journey. This is me with Jimsonweed. And this painting is the most, it's sold at an auction at Sotheby's in 2014 for $44.4 million. Highest price ever paid for a painting by a female artist. And I'm like 1 inch away, if you can believe it. The guards are like, whatever. So it's pretty cool. And of course, again, OKeeffe hated being called a female artist. She just wanted to be called an artist. We don't say most expensive painting by a male artist. So she had a very complex relationship with feminism. I could talk for an hour about that, and I learned so much about her life, about feminist art. But basically, she rejected the male critics' interpretation of her work from a male sexualized point of view, and she rejected the feminist interpretation of her work 50 years later in the 70s as being some manifesto of feminine liberation. She rejected all interpretation and wanted to simply let her work speak for itself. But this was pretty cool that I got to see this painting. And I'll show you another, there's another couple. So you can show the next slide, Lana. This is at the same exhibit. This is called Abstraction Blue, and I just happen to love it. I thought this was an extraordinary painting, but this just gives you some idea of some of her work. And so I felt that to learn about OKeeffe, I had to see her work. Of course, I read books. I talked to experts. I went to archives and read articles that are, I read like newspaper clippings that you couldn't find online. You had to actually go to the OKeeffe Research Center and see the actual clippings. So all of that was really wonderful. And so we could go to the next slide, and I'll show you another bit of my adventures. So this is really magical. So as I was starting to learn about Georgia OKeeffe, I came upon the fact that she had spent 9 months in Hawaii and did 20 paintings there. I'd never heard of this. And most of us think of OKeeffe as the bones in the desert, the hills and the skulls, or we think of her as the giant flowers. But in fact, she had this brief period in Hawaii that turns out was at a critical point in her life when her marriage was falling apart, her husband had been unfaithful, her work was stagnant, the critics were down on her because they said she had nothing fresh to offer, and she got an offer by Dole Pineapple Company to go to Hawaii, paint a pineapple, all expenses paid. So I thought, well, this is pretty great. So I Googled OKeeffe Hawaii, because I think this is a metaphor for my protagonist. She wants to find her own Hawaii, the place or the moment where she can be renewed, where she's stuck, a stagnant marriage, a stagnant career, where she can find what can come next, her place of transition, her place of transformation. It was the perfect metaphor. So I Google OKeeffe Hawaii and find out that for the first time in 80 years, all of the Hawaii paintings were going to be shown together. The New York Botanical Garden in 3 weeks, half an hour from where I lived. It was like a sign. I mean, can you imagine what luck that was? I didn't even have to get on a plane to go anywhere. It wasn't like it had happened 3 months ago and I just missed it. So I got to go and see this oeuvre, this group of paintings. I talked to the curator. It was really amazing. And I even went to Hawaii later too. And another thing I did, if you want to go to the next slide, Lana, I went to visit New Mexico where OKeeffe lived and worked. And it was really amazing to get to see the landscapes that she actually painted. This particular hill is the cover image of a collection of her work. And the painting looks here I am in 2018, and the painting was done in the 1930s. So a little bit of the bushes were different, but otherwise it's identical. And it's really somehow walking in the footsteps, visiting her home, seeing where she set up her easel. All of this was like a really incredible journey, and it was really cool. So are we up to number 8? Was that the last of those pictures? I think that was the last I wanted to show you of that series. So we can just leave the photos for now, and we can go back to to me talking, and I can tell you a few more things about the story, and then I'm going to let Lana ask me some questions, and you guys can ask me questions, because that's much more interesting than just me blabbing. I guess the other things I'd say about the book and writing it is that I wanted to write a story that would speak to women and have no easy answer. The end of the book, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to end it until I began working on it and got to know the characters more deeply. And then it was very clear to me what needed to happen. So I just share that because a book is like an organism. It kind of grows or under your care. And I'm not one of these authors who has everything, meticulously outlined, and then you just do the paint by numbers and fill it in. You have an idea, a vision, but it speaks to you. The characters tell you what they need you to do for them as you get more and more deeply into the writing of it. So it's just the most amazing experience. I just love doing it. But I think it'll be more fun to let Lana ask a few questions, and then you guys please, whatever interests you, that's what I'd like to address. So you have some questions, Lana, yes?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I was kind of fascinated with the title. I know the cover of the book is really interesting, but I think you already mentioned
Yeah.
about the cover. But what about the title? How did you come up with this interesting title?
I said that finding the title of a book is almost harder than writing a book. It really is. I went through there were like 3 or 4 previous titles and I just spent hours Googling things. I couldn't find it. And this one, actually, I plagiarized myself because when I was an academic, I mentioned that I interviewed people living with mental illness. And one person I interviewed, well, of course, it's not a mental illness in the sense of like depression or anxiety, but she had a diagnosis of Asperger's, which meant that she was socially very awkward and different. And I remember this woman telling me, she said, "I'm not like the other birds. I turn my head differently. I fly at night. I'm like an owl, not a real bird. I'm an owl. I'm the queen of the owls." And that stuck with me as this way where she had embraced who she was. And so I thought of Elizabeth being this owlish sort of bookworm, and she needed to really be her full, glorious, regal, amazing self. So it came to me in an inspiration from this interview I'd done, years ago, and the publisher was like, "What?" And I said, "This is the title. That's it. We're done." So I had to kind of fight for that title. Whereas, as I said, I had to let go and let the experts show me the cover, because my idea of the cover was completely different, and they were right and I was wrong. So yeah, I love the title. I just think it's not your typical, one of the early titles was More Than She Knew, which was like a boring title, like every other women's fiction book, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to call it Her Own Hawaii, but then I thought people would think it was set in Hawaii, and that's not true. So I'm happy with it, and it's intriguing. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I love the title.
Great.
Can you walk us through the creative process in a way that what came first? When you started thinking about of this novel, what was first, Elizabeth or Georgia?
Yeah.
Mind.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like a convergence. So I had a discarded scene in, every author has one or two books that will never see the light of day, thank goodness, right? So my first book that I wrote, but there was a scene I was very attached to actually it had to do with that black iris painting, where the protagonist in that book, who was older, had a kind of powerful experience in front of that painting. So it was like a little thing in my little file in my computer to use one of these days, So that little germ was there. And I think I had another germ from OKeeffe, which is this painting behind me that I had in my house as my sort of my post-divorce manifesto. It was the first thing I bought for myself to fill the wall to represent the person I wanted to be now. And I bought it, I framed it. It was just my statement, big and bold and bright in my living room when I first got divorced. So it was something special for me. And these were sort of my subconscious, you might say. And then I was thinking about the Me Too movement, which was very much in the forefront at that point, about how somebody might manipulate a woman to do something that she wouldn't ordinarily do if he could find the right sort of coin. And as an academic, I knew that having an academic angle could be the right coin if you were part of a college community. So this was noodling around. I had my own journey about learning to embrace my whole self, not just my mind. So there were all these things converging, and it wasn't a linear one came first. But they all began to just, work in me. And so I had a feeling about Elizabeth, kind of had a scene. And then as I said, the more I learned about OKeeffe, the story began to really clarify. So this is a mushy answer. It's a nonlinear answer. That's the way it went, though.
Did you did you find it challenging to interpret the art of this painter in your book?
It's a great question
because you are not a professional in terms of the art. How did you find this? How did you meet this challenge?
That's right. And I was very sneaky because in the book, for example, Elizabeth draws all sorts of interpretations of the various Hawaii paintings. And are they true? Is any interpretation true? Since OKeeffe herself rejected interpretations of her work, scholars, some of them are more famous, that their ideas have more weight, but we don't know what the paintings really mean. So the way I got around this was I took some liberties. I mean, Elizabeth interprets these paintings in some ways that, but they're her projections. Because I put it in her words, in her mind, nobody can accuse me of getting OKeeffe wrong, because all I'm doing is saying what a fictitious character sees in the paintings, if that makes sense. So if Elizabeth needs to see, for example, in one place she's looking at OKeeffe's early work in New Mexico as a way of reconciling with menopause. She had wanted a child, Stieglitz wouldn't let her have one. And when she went back to New Mexico and started painting the empty pelvis, was about the age when she would have been going through menopause and reconciling to her empty pelvis. So is that true? It doesn't matter. Elizabeth says that's what she thinks it means. And so Elizabeth is not a real person. So she gets to say that. Does that make sense? So it was a way that, and so there's a lot of things Elizabeth may be projecting in this book. Her relationship with Richard, this male figure, the photographer. This is something I talk about with book clubs, and I really don't want to give it away, but he's complex, and whether he manipulated her and was a jerk, whether she was all just her projection, something for people to think about and talk about. But certainly we see what we want to see in art, in people. We make them into what we need them to be.
Yeah.
So.
You said that it's in terms of Georgia O'Keeffe presence in the book. It's not a biography, it's not a historical novel, but how much of what you wrote you wanted to stay fictional in terms of her life in the book?
You know, Keeffe?
Yes.
Well, the events and so forth are absolutely, I mean, I did a ton of research. There's a extensive bibliography at the back of the book. I read, God knows how many books I talked to people. I talked to the director of the O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe. I talked to a couple of scholars. I talked to someone who had actually known O'Keeffe, etc. So the facts of O'Keeffe's life are accurate. The paintings, the dates of the paintings, all that is accurate. The only thing that was, again, how can we say what a work of art means, particularly when the artist herself refused to endorse any meaning, you know? But it was really fascinating to learn about O'Keeffe, really an extraordinary woman, ahead of her time. You know, think about it. She emerged really in the early 1920s. She kept her own name. Women did not do that. She defined herself by her work. Women did not do that. She held her own in a male-dominated profession. Probably the best known female American painter. I mean, probably the only other painters as well known would be Frida Kahlo, but she was Mexican, so she's not an American. She's known as the mother of modern American modernism. She just broke new ground in the art world, man or woman, you know, an amazing person, reinventing herself. So anyway, so Elizabeth sees in O'Keeffe someone who's this voluptuous nude in the paintings that we're not going to show on these slides. And also this austere, you know, androgynous, you know, monk of the desert kind of thing. So the two extremes and everything in between.
Did anything surprise you while you were writing the book?
Oh, everything. I mean, that's the journey of, you know, many things, but just to give an example of how, you know, you change when you're working on a book. And I started out being satisfied with having one-dimensional figures for the sister and husband. I thought that's all the plot needed. But as I was working, actually my mentor pushed me to make every single character, even the minor ones, multidimensional, human, someone worthy of love and respect, perhaps limited. But that was the discovery. I think Elizabeth, I knew her from the beginning, but I had to find the humanity. I had to go deeper into the husband and the sister especially. And it came at a good time for me because I feel, well, of course, the book was finished last fall, well before COVID, but this already the country was becoming very polarized, and I could feel myself classifying people. And it really helped me to be able to meet people who might differ from me in their beliefs, but to feel their humanity, to feel what in them I could respect and love and connect with. So that was the gift to me, if that makes sense. My characters taught me something.
Talking about
Lana, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me make sure you guys see me. Hold on.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Hi, it's Olga from West Orange Library. Hi, Mary Jean. I can't see you.
She doesn't want to be seen.
Oh, okay. I don't either. I keep making my video unseen because I'm having eye trouble, so I keep blinking. But I apologize. But Barbara, if you don't mind, I do have an interesting. Well, maybe it's not interesting, but I do have a question for you. That early in your presentation, you mentioned the journey and the research involved in a character for a novel.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, how do you approach what angle of research to tackle?
Well, were you here when I was going through some of my slides of visiting OKeeffe's home and paintings?
I saw some of the slides, yes.
Yeah, I talked a lot about, for OKeeffe. Now, means I had to learn about her because she was a real person. If you're going to have incorporate a real person, you have to learn about them. But are you also asking about how one creates a fictitious character?
We can go with that angle. That's fine. Based on historical information. In other words, you're bringing in interpretations of O'Keeffe's work into the fictional character, from what I understand.
Well, I think I talked about that a lot, and I don't mean to dismiss you, but I think to use our time well, I don't want to repeat what I've already said. So I did address that a lot, about how I went to see her paintings for myself and talked to people and went to archives and did all of that. But again, since O'Keeffe is not in the book, as you know, there are books written where the historical figure is on the pages. There's a whole genre of that. This is contemporary. And so my protagonist is a doctoral student learning about O'Keeffe. It's her story. And yes, I was a doctoral student. I got my PhD. In fact, the campus in the book is, I have the campus I used to teach is what I picture in my mind's eye. I don't name it. There's no dates. There's no location tags. But I think for me, it helps to have a picture in my mind of a real place so that I feel kind of grounded. And the other thing, it's not exactly what you're asking, but I never mention in the book exactly what Elizabeth looks like. I don't ever describe her. And that's intentional because she doesn't think of herself as beautiful, but I've asked book clubs, well, what do you think? Is she plain or is she pretty? And they go, oh no, she's really pretty. So they just feel that she is and that she doesn't believe it. But anyway, I think it helps to have a picture in your mind of the character, but you don't have to describe her on the page. It just helps her be more living and breathing to me. The only characters that probably are really taken from life are her kids, which were my own kids when they were little. Now they're this great big enormous adults, but in their 20s. But I don't think I could have written her children if I hadn't had my own little 2- and 4-year-olds. So that was very much, you draw on people yes.
You would say part of, the journey of the fictitious character does come from a little bit of autobiographical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and again, I think this is an interesting question because if you're trying to work through your own issues through fiction, it's going to be really bad fiction. I did that once. That's one of the books that will never see the light of day. But really, because it was like too personal. It was like I didn't have enough distance or something. But if you have worked through it, lived it, suffered, grown, you can tap into that lived emotional journey and re-embody it in a fictitious story. Again, I keep referring to this mentor. I had a very wise teacher, and she said, there's no harvest as bountiful as your own pain. So in order to write about Elizabeth's pain, I had to go back and re-experience it. Otherwise it's fake, it's just from the head. And that's not good enough. And so I went back into my own experience, but the external events are different. Her suffering is something I understand. Her unhappy marriage, her feelings, etc. But for example, I have never posed nude, as we say, not yet.
Yeah.
It's a joke. At my age, I don't think anyone would be interested in looking at those pictures. But so I've never done that. But I understood the experience of feeling revealed, of yearning to be revealed. Elizabeth wants to be seen and known. She feels her husband does not see her. So she has to literally be seen in order to be liberated. So I understood that. I can understand that without having actually posed nude. So I think there are genres where you, for example, dystopian, futuristic, sci-fi, you don't have to go into your own lived experience. But if you're writing what we call women's fiction or book club fiction, I feel that it's very rooted in the emotional authenticity, even if the outer events are invented. Because actually life is not as good a story as one you can make up. You know, I mean, it's, I don't like to read memoir, for example. It just doesn't, this happened and then that happened.
Mm-hmm.
The plot has to be contrived because it has to be in order to show the unfolding of a transformation. Everything has to be intentional. Everything has to be resolved. Everything has to, and you know, so the plot is invented, but the inner story has to be something that at least for me, that I actually know. It's a long-winded answer,
Mm-hmm.
but is it either one of
No, thank you. That was, thank you. Thank you.
Great. We can't let Lana ask all the questions. I mean,
I'm sorry?
she's my shill in case nobody talks. But if you have a question, then you go first.
No, your writing process was interesting. And of course I had not read the book yet, but I'm enjoying Lana's series of authors.
Oh, good.
Everybody's talking about different aspects of writing. So
Yeah.
and again, Barbara, I apologize. I have no voice.
No, it's okay. You're not being, you know, but I hope people read the book. And this is my little plug. You can buy it. You can take it out of the library. It doesn't matter, whatever. But if it speaks to you, it's really important to leave a review on Amazon, because this is the trail. This is the record that an author has. And that what I'm seeing now is I have enough reviews that my book is popping up when we go, people who like this might like that. And that's how new people will find it. So not everybody's going to happen to watch this video or happen to whatever. So a lot of them find books by browse. Anyway, if the book speaks to you, that's the gift that you can pay the author back. So I'm always, not just me, any author. I mean, I always give a plug for that. It's an extra step, but it's really appreciated. Anyway, anything else without me giving away everything? Yes.
You did mention that you had to launch the book during the pandemic. How was it for you? How do you see it different in terms of publishing the book during these times?
I mean, none of us could have predicted that this would happen, of course. And initially, I kept clinging to thinking that these different events I had lined up would still happen. You know, especially I had this one that broke my heart. Ghost Ranch, that was the picture you saw of me with the mountain in the background. Okay, I had a great big event there. And they were going to invite the whole city of Santa Fe and a podcast. And this was my dream come true. And of course, it began to be obvious that this was not going to happen. So you just let it go. And what happened was that the online community of all of these Facebook reader groups just opened their hearts to authors like me. And they were so generous, hosting talks and giveaways and, you know, just overwhelmingly kind. And the irony is, someone like me with a limited, you know, amounts of events, I didn't have some like 20 city tour with, you know, I probably reached more people through the Facebook than I ever would have reached through the 6 events that got canceled. You know, I was going to have a launch at this bookstore in Manhattan, Shakespeare & Co. It's a great bookstore. And it would have been great if there had been 25 people. But instead, I had a virtual launch through Pen and Brush, and 150 people watched.
Wow, that's
so in a way, a weirdly lucky, but the other part that was really just hard to navigate was knowing that people are suffering and dying, and here you're going, oh, I'm so thrilled, my book, you know, it felt like just shameful. It felt awful, because the subtext of I'm so excited is buy my book. I mean, of course it is, or read my book anyway, and check it out at the library, I have to say that. but you know, it's about look at me, and it just felt horrible. But the way I was able to live with that was I found, and I believe it's true, that stories have always been sources of healing and comfort and growth and renewal, always. And they are now, and we need stories now. So I have something to give. It's not about getting, it's about giving. And what an honor to have a book to give. And if it brings some meaning to some people, wow. So it's been like, I feel, and when all is said and done, I'm glad I launched now. The lessons about letting go, about being flexible, being adaptable, you know, just a real gift. And I hope that no one else has to go through this, you know, but of course, and I think the world of book launching has now changed, that we're not going back to all events being in person, because after all, when events are virtual, people with disabilities, people who can't get a babysitter, people who whatever can be part of it. So why would we go back? So it's really
so true. Yeah.
And then, like, say this, people can watch it later.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's actually been a blessing in the end for authors and readers who can come together better. But, you know, I just, you know, I want this time to be over, as we all do, of course. So a mixed, strange thing. But I think we have, if you haven't, one more question, I think we have time.
Yeah, I think what I noticed when I read your review, the reviews of your book online on Amazon, and you have amazing reviews.
I do.
I noticed one thing in common. A lot of people who read your book can't wait for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some good news for them? Are you working on something?
I have, my next book is April 2021, and it's part of the same brand, you could say, about the search for what's missing. This one is framed around music. I happen to be what you call a serious amateur pianist, so that's and it's also framed around adoption, and I'm a mother by adoption. So in that book, the protagonist is seeking to find where she belongs. Where am I from? Where do I fit? Mm-hmm. And so it's a different journey, a different wholeness, but there's something somewhat similar in the overarching theme of that. So yeah, and I have a third one I'm trying to work on, but I haven't been able to concentrate on it. So, but the second one is definitely it has a pub date, it has a cover, it has a title. Yeah. I'll be back. I'll tell you about it when it's ready.
Definitely let us know. We're gonna be on the watch out for that. Okay, I think I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this wonderful, wonderful book talk. And I know for sure that I want to read your book. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And just wishing you a lot of inspiration along your way for your future books, and wishing everyone to stay safe and healthy and positive.
Thank you so very much. This turned out to be just what I needed today. I was telling Lana that I was so conflicted, could I do this today? But you know what? It just got my heart going with this, which I really, my passion, which I really believe. So thank you for having me, and be well, everybody. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lana.
Thanks.